Where did we get up to? Okay, Shalom Aleichem, recording in progress. Okay. So, where did we get up to yesterday? Okay, let's go over here, mixing truths and lies. On page 136. That's your intelligence. The Yitzhar, from what I remember we were learning yesterday, uses your Sechel. He corrupts your Sechel, he implants what Miller called false science and philosophy, fake science, fake news. And you buy into it, and then you build on that. But that's a downward spiral. It's not an up spiral. Once you're not objective, once you have certain yesaidas that are treif, are wrong, then you're building on that. So again, on 136, your chachma will be then an evil for you, will be a downfall. And your own mind will be a means for your destruction. So Miller says that this is because you're not being deceived by ordinary arguments. You'll be convinced yourself that you found a higher truth. And if you believe that that's your higher truth, it's so much harder to challenge that, which you are prepared to defend because it's your own. When a man's mind becomes corrupted with his philosophy, that's the worst thing of it all. Okay, and he brought examples here, Eliyahu ben Elisha ben Avuya, Spinoza. Essentially, my son in Afula lives on Chovos Spinoza. What a name for a city in Eretz Yisrael. It's not big, a very big street. That at least that. It's a one-way little alley, but okay. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes, and in their own opinion have understanding. And it says in Yirmiyahu, they rejected the word of Hashem. So what wisdom do they have? It's a very tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing because on one hand, Torah Shabbat Peh, we have a Messiah from door to door, right? On the other hand, we're not meant to be parrots. We're meant to think. We're meant to develop. The whole Gemara is the development of the Mishnah, Rishonim, Achreinim, Hashkafa concepts. So it's a very gesher tzarma'ot, to stay on the gesher, stay on that tightrope within the Messiah, building on the Messiah, and not falling to the right, not realizing that you fell to the right and the left, and building false buildings, false concepts, false. And like he's saying, it's so much dangerous because you're convinced that this is mamash be'emes. And it says, Pasuk in Hosea, the ways of Hashem are just, and the righteous walk in them, but the sinners will stumble over them. Right? And that's you say in Torah, that the Torah can be distorted, can be misinterpreted. People can bring riots from the Torah, from the Chumash, from the Nevi'im. I mean, he said before how Christianity is so full of holes. Well, Lamaisa, they bring proofs. That's an extreme case, right? They bring proofs from the Pesukim that what they're saying is true. He says, how can the human mind, one of the greatest gifts to the world, be the greatest ruination? The answer is that this is true of everything in the world. Everything that Hashem gave a person can be used for excellent purposes, to make something out of himself, and it can be used for self-destruction. This is because the way. What's that?
Even in English, right? have a phrase that even the devil can cite chapter and verse.
Tzaddikim think properly, they'll learn to see the truths of the world as they really are, and they become really great. But the ungrateful, disloyal sinners stumble over them. He over here gives a little background. He says, we'll understand these ideas of Chovos haLevavos if we recall that he lived in the so-called golden age of Spain. It was the time when the Moors from Morocco ruled over most of Spain. Even though the Moors were Muslims, they were quite liberal with the Jews, in contrast with the Christians who had previously been in control. And they had what was considered in those days a very high level of education, philosophy, and sciences. And they allowed their Jewish citizens to become educated in these intellectual fields. A number of Jews became enchanted with the atmosphere of intellectual ferment. They fell in love with the Moorish culture. And many of them went over to the philosophical systems that the Moors had developed. The Rambam battles with them in the Sefer Moreh Nevuchim. People who read that Sefer today skip over much of this because they're not interested in that dead philosophy. But when the Rambam wrote it, it was a vital, interesting subject. The intellectuals of Spain were educated and lived by that philosophy, and the systems had to be answered in some way, but some of the Jews didn't answer, they yield. This was a new threat to Jewish life. Previously, the Jews didn't have much contact with philosophy, and therefore they had different kinds of problems. Their problems were external, caused by the nation that tried to force Jews to forsake their faith against their will. But in Spain, it was an internal battle, a battle of the minds. And that's why the Chovos haLevavos says, spends time in this. He argues that when your minds belong to enemies, then you are in the most precarious of positions. The Nemar continues to say, wisdom, when used, he says, encompasses erudition, learning, intelligence, science, philosophy, and logic. When used in the right way, the can cure any illness of the soul. When a person sees the truth of righteousness, he can see the wickedness of the false ways of the nation. He can see the emptiness of the other religions. He could see how unfounded are the claims of their philosophy. If one veers off the straight path in the disciplines of wisdom, it becomes a general sickness. There's no antidote or cure. She says, therefore, the Torah is compared to a fire. As it says, my word is not my word like fire. For it enlightens the eyes with its light. Fire gives light, which means the ability to understand, see things. By learning Torah, a person realizes how false are the romantic ideas of adventure, ambition. Adventure. There's no such concept in Torah as adventure. Adventures. And put your life in danger against the Torah. The Torah gives us the perspective of a natural, well-balanced life with everything in its right place. The Torah makes us understand that warfare is not a noble career among the savage tribes and even Greeks and Romans. Killing was considered heroic in American literature. A cowboy who shoots and kills, or a prize fighter who punches and knocks out his opponent, is a hero. Right? I mean, it's like an unbelievable thing to watch two people. You think we're civilized, right? We don't have anymore. We don't throw people to the lions, right? But in our civilized world, you have boxing. You know? Where you throw two people and let the bigger behemoth win. You beat them up and everyone cheers for him. You have Spain. You have you throw the people with the bulls and excitement and culture. That's the mitzvahs in the world. But when you look at it from a Torah eyes as a firm yid, it's like ridiculous. It's barbaric. What is with you people?
Remind me, Rav Moshe Chafe told me when he was very young, was younger, And
Yeah.
before he was married, he was he really liked boxing.
Right.
And Reb David, he was learned by Reb David. And Reb David said, he heard about that. He couldn't believe there's such a sport. He said, how can somebody connected to Torah do that kind of sport? Like, it was all over the
Right.
world.
And that was the end of that. Huh?
In one of Rabbi Friend's books, he quotes there was Shiva from Telz. Was there a Bloch?
Could be.
Who was
Yeah.
on Shiva at the time? This is going back to the 40s.
Right.
And the guys asked Rosh Shiva then to daven Mariv early at the end of night Seder. They wanted to end Seder early. Why? Because there was a big fight on the radio, and they all wanted to gather around the radio to listen to the fight.
And what did he say?
In the end, I think he acquiesced, he gave in. And it was a whole thing about the difference between, the European mindset and the American buffer. And these guys had grown up in American society, and he made the exception.
Right. Right. But like, when we think about it, I think all of us, right? It
shows that we're all corrupted. That's what it shows. We're all corrupted. From the society.
Right. We there's a lot of things that we buy into from our society, from American society, that's very, antithetical to Torah and Torah. But like, this is so obvious, right? I mean, what are you doing? To put two people into this thing, and they're literally beating each other up, and the winner is the guy who's a big gorilla. He's not. How does anyone justify it? How do you justify it?
I don't understand it, but my father, Olav Shalom, would sit and watch boxing all the time.
All the time.
I remember as a little kid saying to him, "But they're two men beating each other up. I don't understand."
Right.
But to him, that was like the thing.
Right. And like Roganovsky's saying, and we grow up with it, so we accept it. We accept all these truisms, whether it's sports or philosophy or, I always like to quote in the yeshiva, sticks and stones will break my bones, but this will never harm me. Like, we all grew up with that, and it's almost not true. It's against Torah. What do you mean? I'll embarrass someone I know is dvarim, and it's worse than broken bones. It's like, well, what do you mean? Everybody knows it's true. So you have all these things. And that's what he's saying over here. The Torah opens up. Oh, so like he's saying, I think I once quoted one of the Weinbergs or something, had a whole list of things that are, American law, American givens, that like the sticks and stones, and one of them was the fair play, in the old days of the cowboys, the fair play, where you had the good guy and the bad guy. You would start in the middle, turn your back, take 10 steps and turn around, and fair play, whoever could pull the gun quicker. And he used to say, fair play, this guy's a murderer. As soon as he turns his back, turn around and shoot him in his back head. What do you mean fair play? Where's there fair play? Where's there a place for fair play here? Adventure. Where's the idea of adventure? Putting your life, adventure basically is doing dangerous things to get a high. Like, where is that? Where does that come from? So that's what Ramil is saying here.
President who accepted a duel, wasn't there? Was it Martin Van Buren? One of the presidents of the United States.
Fine, you're very well read if you know that guy's name. It's the average guy in America. Like, I'll say, who? I think I only know it because I once had my desk, like a desk thing with all the presidents. I don't know, so. Okay, but killings were considered heroic in American literature. A cowboy who shoots and kills, or a prize fighter who punches knocks out his opponent, is the hero. The Torah opens up your eyes, see the darkness surrounds all these wicked practices, and the lights of the Torah make us recognize the truth. And we have to know, Avraham Ivri, right? We're on the other side of the river. The whole world could accept this. The whole world could think it's great. They pay money to go watch this, This, I mean, boxing is, I think, that is the greatest illustration of wrestling. It's also two guys fighting. At least they're not punching each other. They're fighting. They're like,
But there's sport in wrestling.
I'll tell you, there's a sport in boxing also. Come on.
But no, you're not hurting the other person. It's like, okay, it's a challenge between two people, and there are rules.
There's a
Yeah,
Okay. In any case, you learn Torah, these things become obvious to you. You don't, as it says in Tehillim, Mitzvah Hashem Bora, the mitzvah of Hashem is clear. Me'ira Sinayim, enlightening the eyes, Valmar, another person to him, Ner l'ragli dvarecha, v'orlan see your word, your Torah, your Ner is a lamp for my feet and a light for my path. It lightens up the way. Yet, the sarfa bikoida mi shenoita minisivasa, but it also fire burns with its flames. Whoever turns off its path. Another pasuk. Hashem nishma, for with fire Hashem would judge. Fire is a symbol of misused wisdom. When fire is properly used, such as in a lantern or a lamp, it's of great benefit. If a person carries around an unguarded flame, it becomes the greatest source of danger. Wisdom too becomes a great enemy when it's misused. And it says, Yamter al Rishayim Tachim, he'll rain down burning coals upon the wicked. Again, fire. Va'omar, Yirmiyo, v'amarti lo yaskerenu v'lo yadabra oid. Then I said, because you refused to heed my reprimands, I will not mention him. I will speak any more in his name. His word was in my heart like a burning fire, shut up in my bones. Yirmi is comparing the misused and perverted wisdom of the wicked to a fire burning in his heart. Al-Kain Hizor, says the Chovos haLevavos. Therefore, be careful. Don't stray from the way of your forefathers. Unesiv harishainim. I wonder if he means the avos and the path of the early generations. We have to go, follow in the footsteps of the earlier generations. They were makabel from their rabbeim, and they were makabel from their rabbeim. They were makabel from their rabbeim, all the ways up back to Har Sinai. And you have a guarantee from Hashem to shochach Torah. Mizare, the Torah will continue, and this is the links. El habridiyos, into unsupported fabrications. Don't veer off that. Don't stray from the ways of the earlier Torahs. Create new ways. Be careful not to rely on your intellect, because you can make mistakes. It could be corrupted, and then it takes you to the wrong places, like you said. You have to make sure you have to have a Rebbe who had a Rebbe. And you could test your ideas and your thoughts against your Rebbe. And don't be alone in your advice. It is and don't be alone in your logic. If you find yourself alone, then you know you've gone astray. If you find yourself, your thoughts and nobody's agreeing with you, and nobody of importance, then you know that somewhere you made a mistake, even though it's so logical. That's why you have to have the humility. That's what I was saying, because that's one of the tools of Sahara. He's meshachid your sechel. He corrupts your sechel, and then you think you're talking logical. You think you're talking objective, and since you can't be objective because it's coming from you, you need to have a Rebbe who had a Rebbe. Don't try to be an inventor, thinking you can create new logic. A logic that contradicts the ways of the previous generation is beneficent and faulty logic. Because the earlier generation is our Messiah. It's like the big fallacy of the reform is you can't rewrite something and then say it's Torah. Because Torah, by definition, is why we got to have Sinai. It's not by generation. Call it something else. Call it a new religion. Call it what you want. But you can't by the fact that it doesn't. You can't say so. Now it's a new generation, so I have new rules because that's something else then. By definition, you're taking an orange and saying, okay, from now on, an apple's an orange. No, an apple's an apple. So he's saying a logic that contradicts the ways of previous generations by definition of faulty logic, because the Torah is what we got from Har Sinai. If it doesn't align to that, it's something else. You want to call it logical, you want to call it good, you want to say you found a new religion, do what you want. You can't say it's Torah because the Torah by definition is from Har Sinai and it's passed down without changes. Every nation was led astray by its own private Yetzirah. They were led into unnecessary wars with each other. There were revolutions, overturned governments. Hashem kayom nigbash. He quotes, this Rav Miller quotes a pasuk in Yeshayahu. Ki hashket lo yuchal v'yigorshim meimav refesh v'tit. The Rishonim are in a stormy sea. There's no rest. They're always being buffeted by the winds of different opinions. They have no traditions. They have no derech in life, and therefore they have caused themselves tremendous tragedy. Europe has been in constant turmoil for hundreds of years. Battles, hostilities, revolutions. Kings have been overthrown. People have been beheaded, all due to a desire to revolt. Etc., etc., etc. Oh, this is today's news on top of 145. There was a time when you could ride the subway in the middle of the night. It was perfectly safe. Today, which person would even attempt to ride the subway unless he has friends with him, right? Even during the day, you got to be afraid to push you into the tracks, right? Mm-hmm. Crime is everywhere. The judges are broken down. There's no justice in laws, giving criminals every kind of consideration and encouraging them to break the laws again and again. If Rav Miller would have been alive today, he must have would have had a heart attack. What's going on? Defund the police, let guys out, no more bail, no more this, no more that. All the stores are barred at night to protect them. It doesn't even help anymore. Once upon a time, you could leave your door open all day long, but today people have to lock their doors during the day. Even stores lock their doors today. You have to ring a bell to get in. So there's no question society has deteriorated. We're indoctrinated to think that this is the very best society. But if you follow the news with the eyes of the tiger, you live in a jungle. That's civilization. You live in a jungle. You know what goes on with the riots. Every time they don't like something a judge says or the police do, they just, it's like, a bunch of natives running around destroying things. And you can't call that civilization. But in the 1900s, America was a much better place to live than it is today. There's no question about that at all. It's only because people are independent and want to revolt against the old ways. They're becoming worse and worse. Okay, Christianity. Trust in the Jewish tradition. Here, let's take a step back again, just to see how the logic could be corrupted. I mean, today, you look at the left with their arguments, how corrupted. They claim to have logic. They can't tell that it makes sense what they're, So he says that beware of anything that deviates from the ancient traditions of the Jewish nation. For instance, there's always been a principle of keeping men and women segregated, especially when in large numbers. But today there are some Jewish people who look at the co-ed schools that are popular in our cities and they adopt these policies. They have broken faith with tradition. Even though they may have arguments in favor of co-ed education, they're opening themselves to false tragedy. All the troubles we see among the youth of this country are due to young men and women being together in colleges. First, it's co-ed in lecture halls. Then it's co-ed in dormitories and co-ed in bathrooms. No matter how bad it gets, there always seems to be another step lower. Once you stray away from the paths of your forefathers, you're on your way to destruction with all the good arguments. Everything makes sense. Even though at that moment there may be legal arguments and claims of fairness, all these things are misuse of logic. So as soon as you see any discrepancy with our traditions, you have to suspect that something's very wrong is taking place. Okay, let's stop here. How's that?